Hello, my creeplings. We're back. This time for installment 2 of the Ash Williams saga, Evil Dead 2, Dead by Dawn. Now, just a quick review. In the Evil Dead video, we went over the terminology for the group of guys that I tend to refer to as either the Michigan Movie Men, the Detroit Movie Men, the Detroit Movie Mafia, the Michigan Movie Mafia, which includes the Raimi Boys, Bruce Campbell, Scott Spiegel, etc., etc. Please refer back to that if you get confused. We went over the movie itself and the short film proof of concept that they did called Within the Woods. So this is the second movie. This is where they got off of Evil Dead, and Sam follows that up with Crime Wave, which doesn't do very well with the critics or the box office. So they go back to the drawing board and go, okay, what can we do? And they conceive of Evil Dead 2, Dead by Dawn. Let's just start going through the specs and I'll just keep telling the story with my little interjections put in. So, Sam is director, of course. This one was written by Sam and Scott Spiegel. Now, you're going to notice there's a tone shift where the first movie was definitely a straight up horror movie. This is where the horror comedy comes in, and I believe that comedy dose was brought in by Scott Spiegel. Scott was part of the Super 8 group. He's worked with these guys before. I want to say Scott Spiegel. Was it Scott Spiegel or Josh Becker? I think it was Spiegel who was responsible for the movie Intruder, which I have talked about in the early days of the channel. The first October challenge, I did Intruder. Spiegel wrote and directed that one. It was based on one of his Super 8s, if I remember correctly. And Ted was in it. Bruce was in it. Sam was in it as an actor. So, yeah. And that had a very, that had a light, I don't want to say lighter tone, but it definitely had some humor in there. And there were some shared camera angles, etc., etc. Okay. So, Joseph Loduca does the music again, another Detroit Movie Mafia guy. This was released in the U.S. March 13th, 1987. So there was a pretty good gap between the first one, which I believe I said was released in 82 or 83. So there was about a 5-year gap between releases on this one. So they'd had some time to work on things, hone their craft, and make connections within the business to bring things in. Which is notable because this movie is also one of the early starts of the K&B Effects group. Nicotero, Berger, and I just totally blanked on the other guy. But yeah, those three were working with the head makeup artist on this, effects artist, and you can see a lot of their work. It's Howard Berger, Greg Nicotero, and Kurtzman. I knew I'd remember the name eventually. This made its budget back. Its budget was $3.5 million. It made $5.9. This one starts off a little bit weird. And if I can get it to work, there's a YouTube video where Bruce himself explains this. I will link it below, but I will paraphrase as best as I can. This movie starts off, some people argue that this is a remake, and some people argue that this is a sequel. Because of rights issues, they couldn't use footage from the first movie to get you caught up to speed. So what they did, after they had the initial voiceover narration explaining what the Necronomicon, the Book of the Dead, the book with the gnarly face on it, what it is, they go and they do a new abridged beginning that encompasses kind of what happened in Evil Dead. Now, I look at it this way. Now, this isn't so much a Bruce interjection, but like I said, watch the video where Bruce explains this. But the way that I look at this is if Ash is telling this story, Ash is a pretty unreliable narrator by this point, especially after what had happened in the first Evil Dead. He's got PTSD. The man's 2 steps away from being thrown into a hospital for issues. So, and if he has to keep retelling this story, i.e., being interviewed, interrogated, whatnot, he's not going to go over every little bit of nuance. He's just going to gloss it over. So, instead of having all 5 characters from the first one, it's narrowed down to Ash and Linda. They're away for a weekend in a cabin. Instead of Scotty finding the tape recorder, Ash finds the tape recorder and plays it, and we get to that point where Linda's dead, been buried, and the evil is chasing Ash out of the house. That's like the first 7 minutes of the movie is the voiceover and the recap, as I call it. From that point, it is now a continuation of the story, because at that point, Ash was the only survivor at the end of Evil Dead, and everything should still play pretty much the same going forward. Now, again, I mentioned this in the first one, the continuity on this series is a bit all over the place, because I don't think they ever intended to make more than just the original Evil Dead film. But since it did so well and they kind of needed to save their butts, they went back to the well and gave us this gem. Now, we get to that point where the evil catches Ash and takes him over, if I remember correctly, if I'm not jumping ahead, because this shows up. Yes, he briefly becomes possessed, but then the daylight comes and drives it out of him, and he passes out for most of the day. I can see where that would happen. The body gave out, and he's done for. Again, poor man. He wakes up in the late afternoon attempting to leave. Now, here's where one of the continuity errors comes in. He hauls himself into the Delta. Yes, the Delta. We're back with that. Ash's shitty car is this Delta. And he drives like he's going to leave, and he finds the bridge blown out. Now, they seem to have forgotten or chose to ignore the fact that he had already done this with Cheryl in the first one. So there's what I mean by some of the continuity kind of got thrown out the window. And you'll see lots of little bits of this in the series. It's kind of sad that they couldn't tighten it up, but by the same token, it gives us fun stuff to nitpick and bitch about. So Ash is forced to stay back in the cabin. He's chased by an entity, we're assuming it's one of the Deadite demon spirits, back to the cabin. Now, while this is happening, I'm assuming she's a grad student, or, anyway, her name is Annie Noby, and she is the daughter of the people who, in this case, own the cabin. In the first one, it was unknown as to whether or not Professor Noby was using the cabin, had rented it and used it, or if he owned it. In this case, Ash and Linda pretty much crashed the empty Noby cabin. Empty. Noby cabin. So Annie Noby has come back from the same dig that Professor Noby had found the original Book of the Dead at, with extra pages. She meets up with colleague / possibly boyfriend Ed at the local airport. We're talking local, not like commercial, more like a few prop jobs fly in every now and then, and probably crop dusters type small. And they are assisted by Jake and Bobby Joe. They are a couple who are a couple of rednecks. Now, Jake is played by Dan Hicks. Dan Hicks is one of the Raimi ensemble, as I call them. Again, you'll notice that a lot of times Raimi will reuse actors because he's comfortable using them. They're friends, they're relatives in some case. Ted. No, I'm not calling out nepotism, but sometimes you just get to the point where you like working with certain people. And in Sam's case, it's Bruce. It's his brother Ted. Dan Hicks shows up in a lot. I can think of 3 that Sam had a hand in that Dan showed up in. This one, Easy Wheels, and Darkman, right off the top of my head. I'm relatively sure there are more. But yeah, so Dan Hicks is a Raimi ensemble. We have Bobby Joe is played by, she's listed here as Cassie Wesley, but I do remember her at one point in time being listed as Cassie DePaiva. She was on a soap opera that I can remember, and she also used to host a knit and crochet program on PBS. That's all I know her from, but this is the very young Cassie Wesley. And that's all the casting I'm going to talk about at the moment. Somebody else comes up later and we'll talk about him again. And then, of course, Bruce plays Ash. We've already gone over that. So she convinces the rednecks to take her to her father's cabin, and when they realize the bridge is blown out, Jake lets it be known that there's a walking trail that will take them around and about, and they make it to the cabin. Now, from the time that they leave the airport to the time that they get to the cabin, all hell breaks loose at the cabin. Ash pretty much goes psychotic, and the powers that are surrounding him definitely egg it on. They resurrect Linda's body. It's half rotted. I don't know how it rotted so fast, but it's half rotted. Heads off. She does this dance through the mist, and he ends up. Okay, this all happens so fast I can't remember the order, so if I'm out of order on this, please forgive me. Somehow Linda's head bites onto Ash's hand and will not let the fuck go. Ash thinks, first thing, work shed, heads out there, puts Linda's head in the vise, and goes to get the chainsaw. Well, chainsaw's missing because Linda's body has it, and there's this lovely little like ragdoll puppet moment where the body is trying to attack Ash. Body's defeated. Head is sitting there taunting Ash, and he just straight into her skull. Shuts that up right away. Well, because Linda, the head, bit his hand went bad. He has to lop this off. So this is where we're starting to get Ash. He doesn't have the chainsaw on his hand yet, but he's got the stump. The hand is undead, and he chases it around, and it wreaks havoc. It's constantly giving him the middle finger, and at one point he traps it under an overturned waste paper basket with Farewell to Arms, the book, on top of it. That's the kind of stuff that Spiegel put in, the horror comedy. You really get a good idea of Bruce Campbell's physical comedy chops. You can definitely tell these guys were fans of the Three Stooges by this point. Poor Bruce. Throwing himself around, being led by, like acting like his hand is possessed, so he's leading himself with his hand, bashing himself in the face with dishes. Yes, I'm sure they used the breakaway dishes, but those things probably still hurt after the third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and etc. take. We get to the point where there's also the laughing room, and where everything in the room seems to be laughing at Ash, which causes him to go into hysterics. It's fucking hilarious. The reflection. Excuse me. Me and my yawning. The reflection. Talking to him, I believe, happens. I want to say that's in every movie, but I could be wrong. We get to the point where the two parties meet. I believe it's right after the hysterical laughing room breakdown. Ash shoots the door and gets Bobby Joe, the redneck woman, he shoots her. Ed and Jake, I believe, tackle him. I'm just double checking. Okay, yes, they throw him in the cellar, thinking that he murdered Annie's parents, Professor Noby and his wife Henrietta. I really have to look at my notes on this one because my brain, this is a bit more of a bang, 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 and my brain sometimes wants to put things out of order. So, but I digress. So the new 4 group, the Annie Noby group, as I'm going to call it, listen to the reel-to-reel tape deck and listen to Professor Noby, and they figure out what was going on. They also figure out that one of the demons, he calls them Kandarian demons. I don't know where the name comes from. Probably they call it Castle Kandar, where the dig was taking place. So I'm assuming that's, I don't know if it's supposed to be in the British countryside. I don't know where the name Kandar comes from, but I'm jumping ahead. I'm sorry. So we find out that one of the demons possessed his wife Henrietta. He killed her and threw her body in the root cellar. Here's where we get funky creature effects, man in a suit, and it's Dear Theodore. It's Ted Raimi in his role that got him his Screen Actors Guild card. He got a SAG card playing possessed deadite Henrietta. I did not know this until way late, like after like my 6th or 7th time watching it. And again, I was aware of Ted from the 90s, but I did not put 2 and 2 together because he is so covered. If you ever get a chance to watch any of the behind the scenes on the effects, poor Ted. They filmed this thing. They made the cabin in a school gymnasium during the summer. So the school was not in session. It may have been an abandoned school. He's basically wearing foam rubber latex from top to tip, from top of his head to the tippies of his little toes. And there was a heat wave that summer. This poor man, there is a shot in one of the behind the scenes where they're taking the fake foot prosthetic off and just pouring the sweat out into cups. It's gross. And that poor boy. I mean, he was a skinny little man back then, so there wasn't much to keep him insulated. And if he was getting that warm in there, they had to put him on oxygen for after some takes. I mean, there's a shot where they have Henrietta's floating in the air and spinning around. If you watch closely, you can see where the suit's split in the ass. And Ted finally got his air conditioning right up his fanny. I need to clean my glasses. Give me a moment. So yes, he does an excellent job as the creature actor as possessed deadite Henrietta. Again, there's more chaos. Ed gets infected while Henrietta's in the basement, in the cellar. They have her locked up. Bobby Joe eventually ends up getting taken by the woods because the trees are alive again. Fortunately, this taken by the woods is not as graphic as the assault on Cheryl. They learned their lesson. Jake ends up getting thrown in the cellar, and you find his bones later. Jake, before he dies, in a fit of rage, wanting to go out and find Bobby Joe after the woods have taken her, throws the extra pages that Annie Noby had brought in. That's what they had found, and that's what they were supposed to be researching. He throws them in the root cellar. We have yet another showdown with Ash and Henrietta. Now, this is also where we get the infamous attachment of the chainsaw to the hand. Annie and Ash come up with the idea, and it's a set of quick cuts. It's like a quick montage. We also get our first groovy uttered. This is one of Ash's big catchphrases, and the first time it was uttered was there when he gets the rig up, starts the chainsaw up, saws off the shotgun, and he just looks up and he says, "Groovy." This is the one where Ash's attitude really started showing up, where we were starting to see how much of a smartass he can be. Again, watching the progression of Ash Williams change is a fun one if you're marathoning all of this. There had been years in between for them to think of it and for Bruce to hone his chops, but yeah. The effects in this, yes, while they are a little dated, you can tell some are like stop motion and some are puppetry, and there's a lot of rubber mask makeup. They still fit the story, and they're still very excellent. And like I said, this is like the early days of the birth of K&B effects. And K&B, like, they are the name. They are like one of the top names, if not the top name, in special effects makeup. And they have been for a very long time. They understand their horror movies. They understand the effects that need to be done. And they're very, very good at it. So we get to the end. Henrietta's defeated. Ed's dead. The rednecks are dead. We're left with Annie and Ash. Annie deciphers the pages and figures out that the first incantation in this section personifies the evil, makes it real. It's a tangible thing. You can touch it, you can kill it, you can beat it up, it can beat you up, it can kill you. Passage 2 opens up a vortex to banish it. You got to do one to do the other. Annie manages to get the first one done, no problem. Then we get to the second one. And Ash's severed hand comes out of the shadows and stabs her with the dagger, which is still here. The dagger from the first one is still a part of this. It just doesn't get mentioned much until the end. But in her dying breath, she manages to open the vortex. Only problem? Doesn't just take the evil. It takes the Delta. It takes some of the remaining countryside, and it takes Ash. And we end the movie with Ash dropping from the sky in medieval England. Look for the cameo of Sam Raimi at the end, flipping his visor up. Now, so he drops in medieval England in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by knights who are being terrorized by a flying deadite. This flying deadite really, really reminds me of the Harryhausen stop motions. And I don't know if that was intentional. Oh, excuse me. I kind of had a burp. I don't know if that was intentional with the Harryhausen nod, but it definitely gives you a flavor of what's to come in the next one, which is Army of Darkness. Evil Dead 2 is an even crazier ride than the original Evil Dead because of all the comedy put in there. You take everything you liked about the first one, you throw the comedy in it, and then you ratchet everything up by 10. Joseph Loduca knows how to work a score to keep you interested and cue you in as to what's going on. The art direction on this was great. Sam, again, using his, handheld rigs and pitched angles and using better effects. I mean, this is a great ride. This is definitely a solid second entry in a series that ended up becoming 3 films and 3 seasons of a television show revolved around one character. And then we're also getting, we also got the 2 other ones that have nothing to do with Ash, but still have to deal with Necronomicon and Deadites. I know I keep saying I haven't watched them yet, and I will watch them. And when I do, we will do another overview. We will discuss how those may or may not eventually overlap with the story of Ash Williams. But for right now, again, because I have watched these so often and so much, my heart lies with Ash Williams. Bruce makes this character so, I dare say, complex. He seems like a pretty simple buffoon on top of it, But once you sit and you realize everything that has happened to this guy, this movie and the first movie literally take place within 2 days. You have beginning of Evil Dead. They show up at this cabin. That first night is the entire first movie. And then the second film is night number 2. So he's a college kid who's had to kill his sister, 3 of his friends, has been attacked by demons, has been possessed by demons, has been put through the ringer and back mentally, and everyone wants to, just put him on this level of he's an idiot, he's a buffoon. No, the man's mentally damaged. And I sympathize with him to a point. Now, we'll get into some of the later media, and it'll kind of hint that maybe some of the simple buffoonery is pretty much standard Ash. But like I said, we'll get to that when we get to that. Right now, I'm looking at this now. We ended with this poor man not only having to go through 2 nights full of trauma where he's forced to murder people to save his own life. Now he's time traveled. And not just, I went back 10 years or 20 years, something that's still recognizable. We're talking, I think they said it was 1300, the book disappeared. So the year 1300, medieval England, from the 1900s, that's 600 years back in the past. There is no way he's going to be able to adjust to this. So we'll see. So yes, that's where we leave off with Evil Dead 2. Now, Sam at this point, because I know I keep saying I'm only that we're going to talk about more than the movies, and this is kind of what I'm talking about. Let me see if I made notes. Now, after this, he started picking up in the film business. He had some more either really decent, like he had Darkman. Darkman became a big hit for him. And I have done a review on Darkman. I filmed one. I haven't put it up yet. You guys will get the review on Darkman too, because I really liked that film. And I want to say Darkman was the one between Evil Dead and Army of Darkness, which is the third one. Sam got a star back. He started to become a talked about name again. And then Renaissance Pictures themselves were also starting to get into producing other stuff that Sam wasn't directing, that Bruce wasn't working in. And they were snowballing in a good way. They were snowballing to the top. This had the Dino De Laurentiis company. Same company that gave us the Conan movies with Schwarzenegger and Red Sonja with Brigitte Nielsen. They handled this through a shell company because I think between them and a shell company, I think because they couldn't get the cut down to, I think, like a PG-13 or something, and so rather than possibly hurt themselves financially, they went through a shell company owned by one of the De Laurentiis sons, and it did really well, got everyone working again, kept them working, got Teddy his SAG card. There I go calling him Teddy again. I really need to stop doing that, but Greg Nicotero calls him Teddy. And I watched all the behind the scenes I can get my hands on for this, because this kind of DIY, I dare say guerrilla filmmaking, is just, it's my bread and butter. And when you've got people who became so successful out of it, like the Nicotero and Berger and Kurtzman, I just really eat that kind of stuff up. So if any of the extras, there's a lot floating around on YouTube. The DVDs all have some. Watch them. You just you'll be totally entertained. Even just watching Bruce go through take after take after take of physical abuse from Sam. No, smash your head harder. Yeah. So, I'm getting off topic here. Yes, Evil Dead 2. Out of the 3 original movies is probably my favorite. And I know a lot of people say this, but I think it strikes the tone between horror and comedy so perfectly. Like, ridiculously perfectly. It still has that DIY feel that I like, but it's not so bad that you can be like, ugh, yeah, they made this in their basement. I mean, and movies like that can be fun, where, it looks like they made them in their basement, especially if they're starting out. It was nice to see some of the new faces, Annie Nobe and Ed. And by the way, before I forget, just so that, because I didn't do a proper cast read down, I'll do that now. So, Bruce Campbell, of course, plays Ash Williams. An actress named Sarah Berry plays Annie Nobe. She did a very good job. She plays hysterical well, too. Maybe not as well as Ellen Sandweiss when she was Cheryl, but she plays hysterical pretty well. Again, Dan Hicks is Jake. He's one of the, what I call the Raimi Ensemble, or the Renaissance Ensemble. Cassie Wesley, a.k.a. Cassie DePaiva, plays Bobby Lee. Denise Bixler comes in as our Linda this time around, because of course it's a different actress. I think the original actress for Linda had gone on and gotten married and had kids and was not acting anymore and was still living in Michigan. Richard Domier is Professor Ed Getley. He's also billed as Evil Ed, or talked about as Evil Ed in some articles. Professor Nobe's spirit makes an appearance, and that's John Peaks. A lady named Lou Hancock is not possessed Henrietta Nobe, and of course Ted Raimi is possessed Henrietta. And that's it. So I'm serious when I say this is probably one of my favorite movies of all time. This is definitely one of my favorite series of all time. And we still have one more full feature-length film and 3 seasons. 3 seasons of a television show. And that television show is just, it's wild. Thank you, Stars, for the 3 years you gave me. I wanted more, and we will talk about that when I talk about the season 3 episode, or the season 3 video. Because they left us on a bit of a cliffhanger, and I'm angry. Dang it, I'm angry. But on that note, I'll see you for the Army of Darkness video. And we'll keep going. So, I'm just going to say happy birthday to me. I get to go through all this stuff. Woohoo! Month-long celebration. I know, I'm ridiculous. But, on that note, good night, my Creeklings. And I'll see you next time. Bye.